Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Tim, and in this episode we're gonna experiment and see whether or not bushings for our lower control arms, do they even matter? Here you can see the Powerflex bushing the previous owner had installed. This is all I've ever experienced. So let's switch them out with OE rubber ones and see what it drives like. There. Do I simply just, oh. Wow, that's super easy, and honestly, I have a feeling that this test here will show that the biggest pro of using polyurethane is the ease of installation. I have a hard time imagining that it will be as easy to install the rubber ones. Let's find out. And then, well, like that, we'll just pull this off, pull this off. This is so easy. Here we have the polyurethane ones I just took off the car. These are the ones I've been driving with since I bought it, which is around 5,000 kilometers or so. These OE ones, well, these I suspect won't be as easy to install. They'll probably need some lube. Then finally we have these upgraded versions. They're called the Meyle HD heavy duty. Meyle says that they identify weak spots and then improve on them to make it a bit more durable, and in this case of lower control arm bushings, a lot of people say that these actually handle better than the OE ones, but I haven't actually seen anyone comparing new versus new. This is probably some that those that I'm most interested about, like how does the stock ones drive compared to the reinforced or the HD heavy duty version ones, and then finally, does it then make sense to just install some polyurethane ones, these Powerflex here? Does that actually make more sense than just installing the HD ones? And then finally, we have the OEM Plus upgrade, E46 Z4m. These here give a little bit of added caster, I believe, which should help the steering feel slightly. Now these here will obviously have to be installed in these housings here, but I'm gonna wait with testing these for the final test, because once you start messing with the caster, you also start messing with toe in or toe out. So I'll need to adjust the toe in and toe out after installing these. That's my dad coming to help. He simply can't stay away, but notice how easy these bushings here go on, these OE or Lemforder bushings for that instance. Having my dad around will later help me out a lot, because as easy as these bushings are installed, not all of them will be this easy, and actually getting them off is oftentimes a lot harder. But basically from here on out, I install, go for 50 kilometers, test drive, return, uninstall, install a new one, rinse and repeat. The first ones we're going to talk about are these OEM bushings here. Now the OEM bushings, a set will set you back 220 euros, but if you're willing to go with the Lemforder ones, you can actually do it at half the price at 110 euros,
And if you look closely, you can actually see where they scraped off the BMW logo. Now, if your goal is to restore the car and have it as original as possible while saving money, the Lemforder ones is the ticket. But these bushings here are designed with a compromise between performance and comfort. They did this by adding a fluid-filled bushing to it, so that any vibrations and so on would be a little bit subdued, but it's still a compromise between comfort and performance. These were the first ones I installed, and in terms of installation, they're actually pretty easy to install. I tried WD-40 as a lubricant and engine oil, but what seemed to work the best was simply just adding some bearing grease. They drive really nice, these here. If there are any irregularities in the road, you won't be able to feel it in the steering wheel. You'll feel it in the car, but not in the steering wheel. Any irregularities, it won't chase those. It won't tramline, at least not on my 17-inch wheel setup. These are what I formed my opinion of all the other bushings from. And again, somewhat easy to install.
At this point, it was time to remove the OE bushings, and I don't know if I'm incredibly weak or if I'm doing something else wrong, but these bushings were absolutely stuck. Not as stuck as the heavy-duty Meyle bushing would turn out to be, but they were pretty easy to get on, these OE bushing, but once I were to take them off, I simply couldn't get them to budge, and I tried a few different methods, as you can see here. The only thing that actually ended up working was something that my dad suggested, that I'd simply just use a puller, and at this stage here, I've probably been working at it for like 10 or 15 minutes before I gave in and took his advice. But ultimately, when I started using the puller, it would turn out to be a lot easier. And while I thought this was a pretty hard job, removing the bushings that actually came on fairly easy, it would turn out that a little later, when I were to install the Meyle HD bushings, I was in for an entirely different world of hurt. Those Meyle bushings were absolutely impossible to install by hand, at least for me. While the OE bushing simply slid on by hand, I couldn't get the heavy-duty Meyle ones on, and I tried using a hammer to punch its way, but even with a mallet, I didn't really get that far. And I guess at some point my dad actually got tired of me banging, so he came up with honestly just a simple tool to help me. And once we started using that, it was actually a breeze, not just with these bushings here, but every or the final bushing I were to install later on. I'd highly advise you to go and buy this tool if you're not installing either the polyurethane ones or the OE ones, as these heavy-duty ones and the Z4m ones are solid rubber and somewhat harder to actually install.
Okay, so next up we have the Meyle heavy-duty versions here. Now, these bushings are probably what surprised me the most in terms of how useless they actually are. Now, the difference between these and the OE ones is that these are not a liquid-filled rubber bushing. These are a solid rubber. So That means it should be a bit more harsh on the road. They literally don't offer anything that you won't get elsewhere. For comfort, which rubber tends to lend itself to, you have the OEM ones, and if you're looking for the performance benefit of a more solid rubber bushing than the OE, then you can save money and time and just buy the polyurethane ones. So another thing about these is that they're super hard to install, being that this is solid rubber and a pretty stiff rubber. Actually installing them on the control arm is super hard, and also getting them off as well is super hard. So I really don't have anything nice to say about these other than maybe they were kind enough to actually write right here and write left there. I don't know how they installed the OE bushing one, but if you look closely on an OE bushing here, there are no marks from actually pressing this bushing into the holder here. No side shows any mark whatsoever. Now take a look at the Meyle HD ones. You can actually see where they pushed it through in this direction here. Does it matter? Probably not. They don't offer any performance benefit over the OE ones, and they don't offer any comfort benefit either. They do transmit a bit more noise, vibration, and harshness, and they do tend to have a little bit of tram lining and so on. But if you're pushing the car in the twisties, you won't be able to tell the difference between these and the OE ones. But the OE ones will ride better, install easier, and only be slightly more expensive if you go for the Lemforder ones.
So now it was time to install the final bushing, the Z4m bushing. With all the other bushings I had installed, the alignment would stay the same, but for the Z4m bushings that would change. Here I simply show what the alignment is before installing the Z4m bushing. This is with the Meyle HD installed, but it's the same for all of them. But after installing the Z4m bushings, this would actually change, and I'd have to do a new alignment. The Z4m bushings were actually the cheapest bushings, but the caveat was that it was only the bushings where the, for instance, OE ones and the Lemforder ones had were a complete bushing, or should I say bushing and housing assembled. No biggie though, I could just uninstall the polyurethane one as I do here, and then use these housings here to install the Z4m bushings. You do need to be careful though that there's a mark on the bushing, an arrow, and that has to point towards a mark on the actual housing. It's super easy to install them using a press. If you don't have a press, maybe you can use a big vise or some kind of bushing puller installer. I haven't tried doing so, but I'd imagine it'd be possible. Just whatever you do, be sure that the bushing sticks out equal amount on the housing, as I try and show here. Here you can see how the bushing is offset and pushes the control arm out towards the outside of the car. it's no longer centered, and doing a check after driving, obviously, so everything was set in terms of suspension. I'd have now 5 or 6 millimeters of toe in, so obviously I had to try and fix this. I use paint to mark where the tie rods are at the moment, and then I do my adjustments so that if I, for whatever reason, fuck up, I can revert to back to where it was. But in my instance here, I only had to turn them each half a turn counterclockwise to get more toe out, or should I say less toe in.
Okay, so I've been driving with the Z4m bushings now for 50 kilometers. What you haven't seen is that before doing all this work with the bushings here, I actually refreshed the steering system. There's nothing wrong with the actual pump, but I had some hoses that were starting to leak a little bit, and the fluid was very brownish, didn't look all that red anymore. And the steering was kind of hard, so I imagined that, okay, maybe refreshing the steering system will help with the kind of hard turning. It didn't, but something interesting happened when I installed these Z4m ones here. It actually became easier to turn the steering wheel, and also you could feel it when you, let's say, approach the center, whereas with all the other bushings, it kind of was the same steering feel however you turn the steering wheel, but here you can kind of feel when the wheels center, just kind of, I wouldn't say slot into place, but it honestly feels pretty cool. And the camber, caster, something has changed, and it honestly really helps. And in my opinion, so far, these here are the best upgrade for lower control arm bushings. It's not going to be a revelation, but they do definitely offer something that the others don't. Mainly, at least in my case here, lighter steering, a bit more feel of when you're centering the car. There's added self-centering, probably because of the increased caster, and it serves a purpose that I feel is justified, in the sense that you can like go OE if you want comfort. You can do the polyurethane ones if you are mainly looking for a more performance-oriented solution. This kind of slots in the middle of those, but again offers some benefits that the others didn't. I'm gonna keep these Z4m bushings here on the car because I quite like the way it drives now. I can do with the slightly less comfort of the OE bushings, with the trade-off being that I get a lighter steering, a bit more steering feel at the same time, a bit more self-centering. I don't feel like they're tramlining at all, but maybe if you run an 18-inch setup or a 19 even, maybe that will be a problem for you. I honestly don't know, but at least for a 17-inch setup here, there's not any additional tramlining or so. So it's kind of a no-brainer for me to keep driving with this bushing here. Now these here, I haven't actually talked much about these polyurethane ones. I had them installed on the car when I bought them, and honestly, I didn't think much of it. I didn't notice anything out of the usual. In general, I'm not a big fan of polyurethane, but I must admit that if anything, this test has kind of, I wouldn't say changed my mind, but at least showed me that there are actually places where polyurethane serves a purpose other than being just easier to install than a rubber bushing. These here offer the same level of comfort as the Meyle HD version does, but they offer increased handling against the Meyle HD. They're 10 times easier to install and uninstall, and they're honestly super cheap. So in my opinion, these here are actually a pretty good purchase for what they are. That leads me to the conclusion for this video here. I set out to find out if lower control arm bushings mattered, and I must say that they absolutely do matter in my opinion. They do add some value, whatever you assign that value to, be it comfort or performance, but there are definitely differences, especially when you're going with the Z4m. If you want, let's say, a plush ride, a somewhat comforting ride, but still plenty of performance in them, go with the OE or the OEM ones. If you want performance but don't have a lot of time, don't want to do an alignment, want to make it easy on yourself, go with the polyurethane ones. You won't regret it. And then finally we have the Z4m bushings, which in my opinion offers something that the others don't. Whereas the OE are for comfort and the polyurethanes are for performance. These actually have a little bit of both, but they also offer improved self-centering, a little bit added steering feel, especially over the middle, and it just seems easier to turn the wheel whichever direction you go. These are definitely one of my favorite OEM Plus upgrades, being there actually still from a BMW, from a somewhat similar platform, even when it comes to the front suspension at least, but they definitely do have a place in this world, just like the two others do. Is there anywhere where I would recommend the Meyle HD ones? Probably not, honestly, not when I've tested these other three types of bushings here, but it's not that they're bad bushing as such. If you have some lying around, if you found them at a great discount or so, go ahead and buy them. Just be aware that they're harder to install, and they're also harder to remove if you need to do that one day, and they won't offer you anything that these here won't offer you. So that's it for this video here. I'm approaching 500 subscribers, and I really do appreciate all of you subbing and commenting and liking and so on. I've said it a few times before, but I'll gladly say it again. I do this for a hobby. I do this because I think it's fun. I like restoring things and then trying to improve upon it, either during the restoration or after the restoration. So it's merely just for fun really, but it does make it a lot more fun when I have someone to share it with. So a big thank you if you're still watching. I hope you found this video helpful or interesting, and if you did, please consider liking or subscribing. Thank you for watching. Bye.